Oh yeah, welcome to a somber Monday.
A somber Monday, albeit a absolutely gorgeous day here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Welcome aboard, everybody. It is March 21st, 2022. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast. We are episode 566.
All right.
Today we'll be going through a diet based on eating crow, because that is what we're both doing after we talked way too much smack on last week's podcast about our beloved Badgers and Vols making it through to the round of 32, only to fail miserably and unshoot our way out of a solid berth in the Sweet 16. Yeah, rough to watch, rough weekend. Great basketball was played by other teams besides the Badgers and Vols. Yeah, it was nice to see Auburn lose, though.
I mean, yeah, it was. And the irony's not lost on me that I was talking shit about
Iowa
and Iowa State.
Yeah, I put that together, too. I wasn't going to say anything, but yeah, it was.
I didn't think of that, but...
well, and to me, you had Iowa State kind of, kick you when you were down after talking smack about Iowa. I was at the 1993 Final Four. I was, for whatever reason, back in 93, I was a Michigan fan. I was a Michigan. I was a Fab Five fan. I had a Michigan starter jacket. Obviously, right. Well, I mean, let's be honest. I didn't get my life together until I was 32. So I was even misguided and it was back. I got some Michigan long shorts from Champs. And that's what I wore when I went outside and played basketball. I was a huge fan of Fab Five for whatever reason, misguided youth, a problem child.
They stole a nation, man.
And they did. And I went, my dad took me down there to New Orleans in 93 to watch the Final Four. And I was about 8 rows away when Chris Webber called the timeout he did not have, and sent them to a loss in the semis. And that ruined me. And then... a long time later, 20 years later, 30 years later, there they go again, screwing up my balls. As Juwan Howard, the compassionate Juwan Howard, embracing such a good
so nice.
So Chris Webber
in victory.
Chris Webber in the stands. So it stung a little bit. It stung, but there's still a lot of awesome basketball that was played. So it was good. It was fun to watch.
Let me know how it goes. I'm getting rid of cable.
Yeah, I figured I was going to ask you if you were getting rid of cable again. And you probably know the EPB operator by hand. Yeah. You're like, Mike Torelli, I'm canceling my cable. And she's like, Mike, this is your 19th time to cancel cable this year. Are you sure you just don't want to hold on to it because the startup fees alone are costing you more money than just sticking with it? But it was fun.
I use YouTube TV now, so it's
there
easy.
You go. But it was a good weekend. Hope you had an awesome weekend. It was a fun-filled racing weekend for our team, and Puerto Rico 70.3 got rolling. It's always kind of feels, like I said in our weekly email, the first big weekend of the year when I'm loading up Iron Track and hear the ding, 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 ding kind of go off when people get in the water and have bike splits and run splits come up. So it was exciting. We'll maybe go into some of that today. For those first time tuning in, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. You have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and podcasts in general that your time is valuable. So we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We'll do swim, bike, and run specific podcast. We'll also do race recaps and get into some race previews here as the season gets rolling. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through as athletes, coaches, and just kind of people on this planet. We'll also talk about what our athletes are going through. We work with a wide range of athletes, from beginner level athletes looking to their very first sprint or even 5K, all the way up to elite level amateurs, and everyone in between from all across the globe. And we'll use the conversations we have with them, the feedback loop and training peaks, email, text messages to drive the topic of the day. We'll also head into our Facebook group, which is Crushing Iron Group. If you want to be a part of the awesome conversation and great community in there, just answer one simple question. We'll let you right in. A lot of really, really wise and experienced individuals in there. It's not an elitist group. It's not full of, untamed banter that kind of crushes you when you ask us, what you would think is a stupid question. Just a lot of supportive people in there, a really great community. So as the season gets rolling and you have questions, whether they're ones that you think have been repeated, ask away. Don't be a lurker, participate. We'll go in there and sometimes even use the topics in there to drive the discussion of the day. But outside of that, we don't do ads, we don't do sponsors, but we do have an agenda. And that's to keep you as happy and as healthy as we possibly can in your endurance sports journey.
I did watch a lot of the games, and one of the things that stuck out to me was like the energy these teams bring. Watch. Somebody was saying that they were at one of the games, and I was talking to them about it, and so they said, "Man, the speed when you're there is so much faster." And just to watch this kind of stuff. But what struck me was the energy of the players and just how intense it is, at this stage of the game when they, when it's everything to lose kind of thing. And how, frankly, some players can stay in the moment and some players get completely flustered by it, and it's just like, they'll, our game, for example, they were just swarming everywhere on defense, Iowa State, and just, it didn't matter. They were just going to go to the ball and hawk it. And whatever happened. They weren't really worried about fouls, it didn't seem like. And some people play with like a little bit more caution, and they're not going to win. It's just like you got to stay in the moment and be focused on the game. And if your head goes sideways, it's going to be over. And
one of the things, and we mentioned this a little bit last week, was one of the things that I, and you and I both try to reiterate to our athletes is that so much of what we do is based on consistent effort, across all things. And you can, a lot of the hottest teams, and this is, goes for all sports, and you think you can kind of turn it on when you want to turn it on, but usually it's too late, and it's about putting consistent work and effort in. And the greatest results come from sustainable, consistent effort, right? Nothing spectacular, because what happens is and you see this, like, I think you said you watched it when Iowa State was manhandling you guys. It seemed like, to be honest with you, was that it was a consistent way. There was no let up, right? There was nothing. There were no breaks. It was not like, oh, well, they'll wear down. That's like, and that is and for endurance athletes, that is the mentality that I think you have to have when you go into, race season and training, is that we talk a lot about with our athletes. We want to coach and train strong, durable, resilient athletes, because they're the ones that are more likely to win, the most. And when we talk about win, we don't mean, win races. We mean like win against themselves, win against the day, win against their, the performance that they have. Because no matter what the conditions lay out, they're going to make it. Right. And I think that's just one thing that is becoming quite distant, honestly, from the way all things are going right, with humanity and social media, is that, the spectacular days lead to spectacular results. But the fact of the matter is those days are very, very few and far between, right? If you really want to get the most out of yourself in training and in racing, you have to have a mentality of being strong, resilient, and durable. And that doesn't come overnight, right? And the reason I like, going back to one of my more proud coaching moments was Ironman Louisville, I think 2018, when it was like just horrific conditions. The DNF rate was insanely high, and we had like 25 athletes. Every athlete finished. And I loved it not because everyone was out there, splattering PRs and taking off 3 hours here and a lot of them PR, but it was the resiliency to put one foot in front of the other. And I think because it seems so small and so insignificant and not flashy, that people are like, what do you mean? Just what? That seems like, I want to do something. I'm gonna go faster, right, and be better. Sometimes the best you can do is just one foot in front of the other. We had an athlete do 100K this weekend. I was talking to him on phone Friday. Last little bit of advice or pep talk, and I was like, just consistent and almost relentless forward motion will get you to the finish line. Because most people, when fatigue sets in and you don't see your full fitness on display, that's when you kind of get into your own head, right? As soon as you slow down a little bit, it's harder to kind of amp yourself up, and you might see, especially like this is I think a great topic for going into this time of year, when yes, it's getting warmer, but when you go into a race that might be hillier than you expected, or harder than you expected, or the temperatures might be more hot, and the humidity is higher, or a lot of athletes, it's, spring is traditionally very, very windy for a lot of places. You go out there and expect to see a certain mile, per hour on the, when you're cycling on your last long rides and you're leading up to a race, or you go out in your long runs and you're hit with warmer temps than you're used to, or more wind than you're used to, and it affects your pace, right? Your effort goes up, but your pace might be slower because you're running into the wind, you're cycling in the wind. That can be a real, for lack of a better word, earmuffs. It can be a real mind fuck for people. You have this level of fitness. Listen, it's easy. It's really, really easy to stay motivated, to be positive when things are clicking, right? When things are going right, when things don't feel like and not that they're going wrong, but when they're expressed in a way that you can't fully see your fitness, or we have a few podcasts that can reference fatigue masks fitness, right? You start to have these self-doubts. It's harder to stay motivated. It's all easy. When things are easy, everything is easy, right? When one or two things get hard, it seems like everything gets harder, right? It's like, stress is stress. It affects us in all different ways. But I think it's a very good trait to have and a characteristic to kind of hone in and work on as you start into this long season, is to be able and train yourself and convince yourself physically, but also mentally, I'm going to weather the storm, whether it's 22 miles an hour like I thought, or whether it's 16 miles an hour against the wind. I'm going to weather the storm. I'm going to be who I am today. I'm going to take the conditions, and I'm going to keep moving forward no matter what. Because again, it's easy to go out and do those workouts where everything is clicking, right? You go out there and it's easy breeze. Those are the easy ones, right? That's why they feel good. But it's the slogs, the ones where you maybe didn't hydrate as well, or you're super fatigued and you go out and expecting to see this, and you're just like, you know what? Today I just got to check the box. But checking the box and the frequency in which you check those boxes are how you get to the biggest wins on race day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was, I saw an interview with one of the coaches, I think from St. Peters, the school that's the Cinderella going down the Sweet 16 out of New Jersey. I think the coach is saying something about like, these guys aren't flustered because what we do in practice is so much harder. And we work at, it's the old practice harder than you play kind of thing. And I do think that it's interesting in endurance sports because that doesn't necessarily mean, running line drills until you're dead and things like maybe you would see in a basketball practice. But it is sort of that, one of the things is, one of those double 4-hour rides that we kind of look at sometimes. And, that can be way harder than the actual race. It's because it's such a mental, challenge. And there's so many opportunities to explore the mental part of the race while you're training. And I just think that we have to get into that spot and space. And, when, like you're saying, sometimes I'll be out running and not have the right gear on or whatever and be like, oh man, it's pretty easy. Just like, I should have just dressed different. All right, let's try it again tomorrow. But that's a perfect opportunity to fight through something and figure out how to make it, Last night yesterday I was setting up my trainer upstairs, and I had the back tire was flat, and I had one of those trainer tires on there. So I was like, wow, this is good. It was a good time to change that. And I was like, holy crap, man, those things are really hard to get off. So tight. And just going through that, I so wanted to just quit and come down here and see if there's another tire, that I could use. But I kind of forced my way through it. Now I haven't changed the tire probably in 2 years or something like that. So it was a good experience. But that's like a little example of how now it's like, okay, a regular tire is going to be super easy to change. But I do think that, man, you got to look for those opportunities like that, whether it's you're too hot or whatever. That's like the perfect practice opportunity, just whatever the case may be. If you don't have enough nutrition or something like that, you don't want to, beat yourself up and grind yourself into the ground all the time. But those are great, because it's like if you're not racing, a lot of people race a lot, and that's a good opportunity. Like my Badgers played in a lot of really close games this year. So yeah, last night's game was the ugliest, crappiest, scrappiest, nothing pretty about it. But I was there the whole way because I was like, they've been figuring out ways to pull out of these when they have nothing going right. And that's really what it comes down to. All you got to do is win. It doesn't matter what it looks like or, and I like what you said about win against yourself because, it's so many races. If you're not used to the environment, it'll eat you up if you're not mentally ready to go through it.
It's about always choosing to find resolve, like to find a way to make it happen instead of finding a way to not get it done. Right. And I think, and listen, our biggest enemy, our biggest competitor is inside our head. Like it always will be. Like it's the negative self-talk. It's the self-criticism. It's that we're not good enough, or we're never going to be fast enough, or it's the training devil on your shoulder. It's like, hey, you don't need to do that today. You know, like Coach Robbie, he's pretty chill. He's like, you know, I take a day off. You know, he's not going to argue with you, so just take one. You know, sometimes you gotta saddle up and get it done, right? And like, listen, we're human. We always look for those things. Like, you know, I know when I'm in that, when I'm like, when you're kind of on the edge of like, I really didn't want to do this today, you'll find every reason to affirm the fact that the universe is like, don't do it today.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you know, there were
That's
like
what the universe wants.
The universe wants. And you're like, see, it wasn't meant to be today. It's like, well, it wasn't meant to be because you didn't want it bad enough. Like, let's just be honest. Like when we say that, yeah, it wasn't meant to be today. I'm like, well, it wasn't meant to be because you made it not be, right? Like I'll do that frequently. If I'm just really tired, or I'm not in the zone, or I'm kind of in a funk, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to the pool deck, you know, and you walk in and you already don't want to be there. You know, or it was a win in the first place just to get in the car and get there with your swimsuit. You kind of you undo your bag and you're like, please no swimsuit, please no swimsuit. Like, please, have left something because see, it was a sign it wasn't supposed to be. Then you walk on deck and the pool is entirely full. And you're like, see, wasn't supposed to happen today. I just go get in the hot tub to the recovery day. Nobody's going to make a big deal out of it. We always look for, well, that's just right. It's human nature. We always look for signs to affirm what we're thinking, right? Or what we're feeling, or really just what we want to do in the first place. And we do it both ends of the spectrum. Like, you know, we always people will always use the analogy about, you know, cars. Like when you're looking for cars, you know, you're like, I think I'm going to get a new, you know, BMW. Every day, the rest until you find one, all you see on the road, BMWs, right? Because it's all you're looking for. You're like, man, are there more BMWs on the road now? No, it's just you're just paying more attention. So we have that. I think it's just human nature, right? To look for ways to affirm. The same thing goes for, you know, people who believe a certain thing and are just they're not really up for conversation. They just want to argue. They're really not reasonable. They will look for everything and every news article and every, you know, media post to affirm what they already believe. They're not going to look for the opposite, right? So we never look for the opposite. We just like to be comfortable. We like affirmation. That's who we are. That's how people are wired, I think. But at some point, you have to just kind of work through those things, because on race day, again, your biggest competitor is inside your head, and you're going to have to have those tough conversations. You're going to have to think, no, I'm going to win today, no matter what, right? Because everyone has, whether they say it or not, everyone has a goal the minute they step in the water. Mm-hmm. Everyone. But the minute you get your body wet to go in and get that swim started, everything changes, right? You get punched in the mouth. Everybody has a plan to get punched in the mouth. Then it's about plan A, plan B, plan C. Like that, I think you have to have a lot of plans when you get in on race day, but the plan always has to be one foot in front of the other. How am I going to fix or address what's going on right now to set myself up for the best day? Because humans in general have become such control freaks. Like we want to control everything, want to know everything. This can be predicted, or we got artificial intelligence tell us we can do that, or tell us this, or like, well, you shouldn't train today because, you know, Training Peak says this, and you can't do that because your Garmin says your body better. It's like we want to be able to predict things so much that we're allowing ourselves to be controlled, right? And so, but some things in life are just unpredictable. There has to be a consistent common denominator with all your plans when you go into race day, which is, I'm going to make it through, right? I'm going to fix it. It might not be like when I go to race, like I have a note card and I have good, I have better, best, good, and then this is a bad day. And they all have kind of like times, you know, kind of ranges, like, you know, swim would be this, you know, bike would be this, run this, overall time would be this, like, you know, where I kind of think I'll end up on race day. It's like a 30-minute range of success, or maybe like a 70. That's a huge range. But what you want to do as an athlete is you always want to provide opportunities within a race, no matter how good or how bad things might be going, to find a level of success. right? And so many athletes go into races and all they're focused on as a measure of success is time, right? Bike split, miles per hour, new swim PR, how they place in their age group. All these things are more honestly about things that you can't ultimately control, right? Let's say you want to go out and you want to have your fastest bikes. You've been working really, really hard on the bike. And then you go out and you have, a day where it's 25 mile an hour winds, headwinds, crosswinds. You might be in much, much better shape. Well, let's say your average miles per hour is, 22.1 and you're really expecting to be 22.9. It's going to be a total mind mess with your whole entire psyche. Like, I've been doing all this work. I guess I'm just not. You're going to start questioning and find this negative. Always allow and provide yourself something positive as a measure of success that only you can control, right? And it's more about mentality. It's more about emotional stability when you get into a race. And it can't be so much about the metrics that's telling you how you're feeling and how you're managing it. You have to kind of write out things that'll let you know that you can tell yourself and reaffirm yourself that you're making good progress and what's happening today is a good thing no matter what the numbers are telling you. Good or bad, right? You're not a champion. You're not the worst. You're probably somewhere in the middle, right? There's only one winner of the race and one person that comes in last. The rest of us, we just fall in the middle. So you have to allow some measure of success to be found in there no matter what happens.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, for me, a lot of times that happens out of the swim and then you got to, recalibrate your whole race, and it can be tricky, man. I think when I was talking about energy earlier, I think like if you come out and you're disappointed in your swim time, you have to be able to sort of flip a switch that gives you a new energy. You know what I mean? Like, how do you find and this happens to me, I don't know about you, but constantly throughout an Ironman or a half, it's sort of like, all right, the body is usually strong enough to, we've usually trained up to the point, but then it becomes this game in your head, like that mental game. Where are you going to find the next sort of stimulation or like optimism? Maybe that's a good word for it, because if you're just kind of in a spot, it's sort of like you got nothing to look forward to. So you have to figure that out, man. This is where I'm at today. What's going to make this a better race for me? Or how can I do that? How can I, whether it's, deciding on maybe you haven't had enough water or enough nutrition or, there's different decisions to make. And it's happened to me where you've kind of been in a funk or whatever, it's sort of a mid-race funk, and then something kind of changes and turns around, and man, what a feeling that can be. So it sort of has to be a constant, in my mind, it's sort of a constant search for, you talk about breaking it up by aid stations or something like that. That seems more manageable. It seems like a better plan than being at mile 3 going, man, I got 23 miles left, rather than, just taking things in chunks or figuring out what will be the next stage that, you can shoot for, instead of like getting swallowed up by the whole enormity of the event. And I just think that's, probably a good way to go through your day too. It's just like, do what's in front of you kind of thing. It really is. It's sort of like, and I kind of get, people give me shit a little bit of the time. I read a lot of, you ever read those like weird Zen books where the master comes out of the water and they say, what should I do next, master? And they say, what do you think you should do?
No, I don't. It's like, I'm already lost.
So, or they have oatmeal and they come up with their bowl and they're like, now I've eaten my nutrition. What should I do next? And they're like, wash your bowl.
No, I don't.
You
read this shit?
Well, yeah, all the time. There's these
all the time. You read this?
Well, I used to. There's these deep lessons in there that aren't really obvious, and you have to really work it, kind of figuring out. It's like, and it really all does come down to just do what's right in front of you next. Instead of getting way out ahead. And I think you had mentioned a quote earlier, right?
Yeah, I'm ready to sing. But first,
okay,
if I can, so I'm going to go back to this oatmeal clean book here. I like, if I go upstairs, am I going to find dirty dishes in your sink?
You will.
Yes, that's bullshit. Because the whatever this Zen master would said, I'm doing my oatmeal. He's saying, well, go clean your bowl.
What?
But you said it in the sink. So right now you're just showing you're not Zen. You got to apply what you read.
Oh, I 100% agree. But that's the point, right?
Is what? You're not Zen?
I think the book was called, one of them was called Zen keys maybe.
Oh, man.
And it's all these like crazy Zen things where you get done and you're like, where's the answer? And there's no
It's kind of like some of the best movies, right? You expect you at the end of the movie, you're like, what? What just happened? You're like, I just make the ending what you want it to be.
They just give you just enough to figure it out on your own. And that's kind of, I mean, I think the reason I bring that up is because, I can't, as a coach, be out there on the course with my bowl. No, but I mean, I just, sometimes you're like, I can't give you all the answers. You know what I mean? That's going back to training and stuff. You have to look for stuff on your own to figure it out,
Well, and you can't listen always to the thoughts that come in your mind, right? And like you've mentioned this a bunch of times before about how,
what's that perfection?
we listen. I don't think there's very, very few things in life you can trust, right? As far as long term, right? Because everything happens minute to minute, second to second. And it goes with athletes too. Like 1 minute they want to go to Kona, the next minute they want to do 100K, the next minute they want to do the English Channel, the next minute they want to just PR their Olympic race, the next minute they want to take time off. That's an endurance athlete, right? That's how most endurance athletes cycle through the course of a year. It's not one complete, sustained, thought out thought. It's just impulse, 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 impulse. Prisoner of the moment, impulse, sign up, DNF, don't start, maybe this, maybe take some time off. All right, I'm all in 20 hours. Like that is the ebb and flow of a lot of endurance athletes, right? There is no, you make too many decisions instead of just kind of sitting in it, right? Let those things and those thoughts come through, and then work through them as they go. And most of the time, what you'll think of is, all right, that was just my thought for but a moment, right? It wasn't how I really feel long term. But most people are so reactionary to a split second thought, right? Either pushing too fast or giving up, that they never know what the end result is really going to be because they mentally manhandle it, right? You don't let things just happen, right? So, example, I got up yesterday morning, came in the hub, and I had what I felt like it was a fairly aggressive bike workout for me. I was doing 4 intervals, 4 5-minute intervals with 4-minute rest in between each, and they were at a pretty high percentage. Warmed up pretty well. I felt pretty good. And then I had a target of about 25 to 30 watts. As we always preach, and I at least occasionally practice what we preach, but I aimed low, right? So my low end, I was like, I'm just going to barely be above the low end. And the first 2 minutes, I'm into this interval, and swear, but after the first 2 minutes went by, my first thought was, you're not going to make this. My legs didn't really feel great. Mm-hmm. So my next thought immediately was, and I think this is what happens to most people.
Push harder.
No.
Okay.
My next thought was, go clean your oatmeal bowl, Robbie. No. My next thought was, you know what? Maybe it's too high. Lower it down some. And then I was like, what? You're 2 minutes in. Mm-hmm. How do you know, right? You can't make a snap judgment and an impulse based on a feeling, right? Because it was more what my head was telling me. And a lot of times that goes when we're a sense of vulnerability or a sense of weakness. When your mind and your body are talking to each other, and sometimes your legs are like, yeah, this doesn't feel good, but I can probably handle it. Your mind's like, oh, I can't handle it, right? And it's like you're not really in sync. You don't believe one or the other, right? And it also goes sometimes when your legs and your body might be saying, dude, I've got it today, and your mind's like, no, you don't. I can't do this. I've never been able to push these watts. I've never been able to run this fast before. Slow down. And your body's like, what? Why am I doing this? So there's it's interesting crosstalk between your mind and your body. And so I was 2 minutes ago, I was like, so I finished up the first 5 minutes, and I'm in the recovery interval. I'm thinking, all right, just try to barely hit the low end this time. It's not, I think in a way you're talking yourself out of it to lower the feeling that you might have when you end up not hitting it, right? I think we all do that. We all protect ourselves mentally by saying things or doing things or acting a certain way or expressing ourselves in a way to kind of protect ourselves from not getting hurt, or really it comes down to just not wanting to bruise our own ego, right? We kind of lower the barrier. And I got into it. The next time I was like, all right, I don't really feel too bad. All right, I think I can make another one. So I went up 2 watts average. That was it. The next minutes. And I started the next one and I was like, all right, just going to make it 1. If I can't do 4, that's fine, but I'm going to make 3. So all you got to do is concentrate on the 5 minutes in front of you. That's it. Not the 15 minutes of intervals you had eventually, but just the 5. And then I broke it down into, all right, let's just start at the first minute real low and then see what happens. All right, next minute I'm kind of hanging. All right, now I only got 2.5 minutes left. It's the kind of mind tricks you can play with yourself to shorten things up, to make your body not think it's some long thing, but instead, all right, that's 2.5. All right, I'm already halfway through. I think I can make it this way. It's that internal bargaining we always do with ourselves in good ways and bad. Like, bargaining, like I mentioned, the pool deck, which was you bargain with yourself. I could probably use a recovery. I'll just hit the hot tub instead of waiting maybe 10 more minutes for someone's lane to open up. You're like, we always bargain, right? And so sometimes I think it's just don't bargain, don't be the martyr. But then finally I got to the 5th interval. I was like, all right, I'm done. I've made it to the last, whether I succeed or fail in this interval. I made it through the workout. I ended up having my best interval the last one, but it was because I kind of hedged my bet going into it, hit them all. But if I had have listened to what my mind said the first 2 minutes, which was, this is probably a little bit too aggressive for you. Just dial it back. We'll still consider it when it's early on. You can always play the, coach always says, minimal dose, always aim low. We always, kind of slide those little, which is good because it keeps us on the right track. But at some point, you can't always immediately and impulsively react to everything, right? And that's something I think we all have to be. I encourage everyone to be a little bit harder on themselves with this. Like, stop making rush judgments and broad statements about something just because you thought it for a split second, right? That was one of when I was in treatment, this guy came in like 45 days, maybe it's 2 months that I was in there. His first name was, he was a speaker or whatever. His first name was Mark, I can't remember his last name, but he did this huge presentation on thoughts and how, as humans, and especially as alcoholics, your first thought is usually wrong. And guess what? Your second thought, it's usually wrong too. He said, and your third thought might be right. He says, so don't ever make a decision on your first thought. He said, before you say or write anything down or act, he said, roll your tongue along your teeth, both sides, 3 times in a row. And then decide if it's still something you want to say or do, because that'll give you time to get through your first thought. And he looked at this. He said, your first thought, second thought, third thought, wrong. He said, fourth thought might be right. And so we're laughing because, there's not much to laugh about at that point, but it was like, it's so true though, because and I think humans are like that in that our first thought is almost always wrong, right? It's impulsive, right? It's impulsive one way or the other. It's either the greatest thing ever and we should do it and we're all in, or that's terrible. That's the worst. And like, wait a minute. Then you sit with it for a little bit longer and you're like, all right, well, maybe some of it was right. Maybe some of it was wrong. Let me take a piece of it, right? It doesn't always have to be all right or all wrong. It can be pieced together, or I see some benefit in maybe doing this workout, but maybe dialing it in, dialing it back, right? You always talk about you love yellows with your athletes, because it meant there was a self-dialogue that was, I don't want to do this. I don't have time for it. But the intent was, I'm going to at least do something and be a part of the workout and just see what happens. And if you get off, you get off, but at least you explored the idea and the opportunity of what this workout might look like instead of premeditating the fact of the workout's going to be a failure if I start and don't finish, or I can always just say I didn't do it and not have like something halfway in between, because most athletes would rather have a total green or a total red, right? Which means they didn't do it at all, an attempt, right? Or a yellow, which to them means a failed attempt, right? Because the failed attempt isn't most athletes' like worst nightmare. I'd rather sit on the sidelines and not participate, right? Than go in and then maybe not do it up enough or not finish and then feel like I, quote unquote failed, right? As an athlete to not do it. When ultimately participation, right? And being thoughtful and trying to get out there and do it and press forward and at least, give it the old college try. That's what you're supposed to, right? And I think it's a conversation we should always, just be very, very, very not delicate with, but proactive and mindful with. Is how is the millions, maybe not millions, the hundreds of conversations we have with ourselves each day, and then what ends up happening as a result of those, good and bad.
Yeah, a lot of what you're saying there makes me think of patience. Not your first thought, second thought. That's kind of like you said, sit on it for a minute. Or I always talk in life about transitions, and transition from getting out of bed, and do you get right to the treadmill like 5 minutes later? And is that, I mean, for me, that doesn't really work, unless I get on there and I walk for 30 minutes or something like that. A lot of times with me, I'm very impatient with the workouts, or, I think a lot of people are probably. And that's why I almost asked, you said you had 4 intervals. I wonder, sometimes I wonder what would have happened is if you would have just made that first interval just another 5 minutes of kind of warming up or something like that. Because a lot of times with me, I can either be like, if it's midday and I've been awake a while, I can get on our watt bike, and a lot of times I'll just hit one of those HIIT workouts, those like 30-minute rides, and they come out a little bit hot, but I'm kind of into my day and I'm warmed up more than that. Would have been a different story probably in the early morning if I tried to go right out of the bed into like pushing, 115% of my FTP or something for, some stuff like that doesn't really work for me. But so a lot of times I feel like I just kind of push through the situation and sometimes it works and oftentimes it fails. But this weekend I got my bike up there. As I said, I was watching the games. I just got on the trainer a few times and I really kind of reacquainted my love with Zone 1 work.
Oh, did you know?
Yeah, I did. But it was very enjoyable, because I think a lot of times we can get psyched out by workouts because it really does seem, before you get into it, it's going to be tough. You already have that in your mind. It's going to be a grinder. And you're maybe not, like you're saying, your head isn't talking to your body. Your mind's like, come on, man. There's a game. Just sit back and watch it with the remote.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more enjoyable. But if you get on it with this idea, like, I'm going to own this. I mean, it's not going to be hard. It's just going to feel good. It's just going to work, and I was sweating pretty good on just an easy spin. I spent quite a bit of time on there, maybe an hour and a half, which is pretty impressive.
It's a long ride for you for Zone 1.
It really was, but I really liked it, And I was like, I could push this harder right now, but man, it feels good right here. And so a lot of times for me, it would probably be good for me to warm up for an hour and then do my interval rides. I think a lot of us could probably benefit from that. You could probably get better performance in general. And I just think it would be easier for your, but like sometimes you got to push through it, I guess, with, you don't have the time or whatever, you're going to do an hour ride. You can't just spin for 45 minutes and then hit a couple intervals, if that's the ticket for the day.
Well, it's really, really hard, and it's become increasingly difficult, I think, for us as people on this planet, and also especially for athletes now, is that our gratification in life, going back to your Zen and mindfulness, right, it's now tied to extremes, right? It can't be a great day unless something extraordinary happens, right? Like you get a 50K raise, or you invest in a company and it goes public, or whatever that means, or you have a 5K PR that you didn't see coming, or you lost 2 pounds, or you had a new PR in the weight room. Like, now great days are like synonymous with something extraordinary and spectacular. It's not about just like, man, I had a really, really good day today. What happened? Yeah, nothing really. Like, it was kind of like the monotonous, boring days of old that are like, let's see, I woke up, I slept pretty good, I got my work done. It wasn't perfect, but I got it done, I enjoyed it, had good conversations at home, my kid's doing well. I was like, that's pretty freaking great. And you're like, but does anything like awesome happen? You're like, no. And you're like, but that is awesome, right? It's like we now live again these, like, there's no middle, right? It's always awesome or it's the worst day ever, right? Like, no one ever posts on social media, dude, today, average, it's like, it was right. It was mediocre. It was like the 6, like we always describe our podcast, like solid 6 out of 10, it's like kind of hanging in the middle.
Showed up, felt good.
And it's like, there's no, it's not fabulous. It's not fantastic. It's not, something you can use to market. It's just kind of, it's just steady Eddie. Right. And but there are awesome results within that, and the Zone 1, Zone 2 rides that are so great for you in the runs, accumulating that, and how great it is for you physiologically. how there's such a huge benefit. People are like, I just don't feel like I'm doing anything. Like, you're doing work. Like we've raised the level of intensity. And I honestly think it's more of a symptom of the stress level we've become accustomed to as a baseline in society, that if we don't feel some load of stress, then we feel like something hasn't been accomplished, right? Like there's not, like we need pressure, we need things to happen that give us a rise, or that like make us feel like we're accomplishing them, because the harder it is, the better it is. Or I'm going to work 80 hours and that'll suffice. Like, well, you could probably do all that stuff in like 30, right? You're just stringing it out. You're not being focused. You're not doing things you need to be doing. So, there shouldn't have to be or today was an epic fail, right? Everything doesn't have to be epic, an epically great day or an epic fail. Like, it could be epically mediocre, right? Or just epically average. Like, that's what you should go for day to day, because there's a lot of greatness in the mundane and the doing the small things each and every day that allow those great days to come, right? That's how those days are built, right? Not these, like, I had an athlete comment in Training Peaks about, his, how he felt his specific swimming, cycling, and running was going. It's like, nothing really amazing happened this week in the bike. I was like, what? Like, nothing amazing is going to happen basically every week. Like, if it does, then it should come as a welcome surprise. But you shouldn't expect something amazing to happen, right? But that's just something we become so accustomed to, and that we crave, and that we judge the success or failure of our weeks on as something amazing or something incredible or something spectacular, or the breakthrough. Because that's all you see in society is the highlight reels, right? You don't see the down and dirty work in practice, right? That comes out. The people that come out and just absolutely destroy race day are the ones that are relentlessly consistent and obsessed with not mediocrity, but doing all the things in between that aren't shiny, that aren't spectacular, that don't get a lot of news, that don't get a lot of headlines, but it's the stuff you won't do, because you're too obsessed with the spectacular. And that is why the more and more and more they can add those things up while you're chasing PRs in every workout, while you're trying to be the weekend warrior who does the 28-mile runs off the 200-mile bikes, because that's what makes you feel ready, because I'll get a bunch of likes and woes on Strava and Facebook. Everybody else, you know what they're doing? They're getting the low-hanging fruit that you're not going to get. And when it comes to race day, they're going to have 50 bushels full of this low-hanging fruit, when you're probably going to have tried to chase the top of the tree every single week to grab that one shiny apple, and you're not going to get it. You're probably going to fall through the branches and not even make it to the race day. But that's how
falling through the branches,
hitting every rung, right? Or every branch. That is exactly what, that's just what happens to us as individuals. We chase that. And usually the bigger the goal you chase, the more you're trying to compensate for your lack of confidence in what you're trying to accomplish.
That's a really good point.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I have a perfect example. I saw a quick little 8-minute video. I watched this guy who's sort of doing, I guess, like a TED Talk or something. But I realized, you heard of that 10,000 hour thing, the Malcolm Gladwell?
Yeah.
Be an expert.
Yeah.
Every expert has to have 10,000 hours of work in to be an expert. And that's a perfect, I guess, analogy for what is going on today. Because, right, it's like everybody said, all I need is 10,000 hours. But that sounds like a mountain, right? But this guy was talking about, so Malcolm Gladwell stole that idea, surprise, surprise, from a guy named Earl Nightingale, who was like a motivational type guy, like a Paul Harvey or one of those radio guys. And his way of saying it was, just spend 1 hour a day working on something you love or you want to be good at in your craft, and within 5 years, you'll be one of the best in the world in your field. Mm-hmm. So it was 1 hour a day spent on something that you want to get good at or perfect or, succeed in, not 10,000 hours, because, that's the thing. What's the first thing you think of when you get 10,000 hours? Like, all right, I could probably do 12 hours a day. I could have that done in, you know what I mean? And I think that's the same mentality that we get into these days. And what we always try to say is like, hey, we want you to spend 1 hour a day training, doing stuff that's productive. And over time, you'll be very good at this 5 years from now, and hopefully if you've been, it's retroactive though, because if you've been in the sport a while, just be consistent over the next year and you'll be surprised. I think, I think I would be if I was consistent, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's really interesting because, I think a couple of weeks ago, I lost my watch after going somewhere and I couldn't find my watch for like a week and a half. And I was just like, whatever. So it was kind of a no watch experiment. And I was just going and I was swimming without any record. And I was trying to find that sort of just self-satisfaction out of it. Like, did I work hard? Did that feel good? Did I leave the pool or did I leave the run? Just, did it feel good? And it was really an interesting thing to do because I wasn't tied to anything. It was just sort of like reminding me of like how I would used to work out or something. Mm-hmm. I would go and you knew when, you left, you're like, man, I just feel good right now.
Yep.
And that's the only thing I was focusing on is like, what is it going to take today? Like, how do I ease into this workout or what do I do now? I'm feeling pretty good. Should I push it a little bit? It was just sort of like this feeling it out, feeling my body and just going for the overall good feeling. And what you're saying about that, was today epic or something like that. And it is really interesting that, when you're not exhausted at night and you just kind of feel like you had a decent, good day, how rewarding that is to go to bed and maybe read for a minute or watch some, a little, movie or something and just kind of fall asleep. It doesn't have to be, like the 10,000 hour day, every time. And there's really, I think it's just really a maturity or something to be able to understand that is success when it doesn't have a medal hanging around it.
Because it's something that's sustainable, right? It's not something that you have to chase.
But it sets you up for the next day too, right?
Exactly. Like you
want to go into the next day. I mean, it's a secret to life.
Yeah.
Want to go to the next workout. I can't wait to work out tomorrow.
Yeah. It's like,
if you can get that going, you're going to win.
You're going to do it longer than everyone else is because everyone else they're all quitters. They're trend drifters. Like, oh, there's a new trend. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. They don't have the focus to stick with something long enough to get to where they want to go. They'll jump on 19 different ships versus staying on the same one to get to where they want to go. Right. It's like taking 2 steps to the east, 2 steps to the west, try to get north and south. Like just go forward. Like just stay on track. But everyone is obsessed with like the epicness of things to do. And that's their new standard. So when they don't reach that, what do they wake up the next day? They're stressed about keeping the standard of being epic, right? Or doing something like, today wasn't my best day ever. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Like you only have one. Like if you expect to have your best day every day, then things are going to suck, right? Maybe, speaking of like of t-shirts, there's one that's called, earmuffs for your kids. I'll give you a second. But there's that, I think that shirt or there's that shirt or hashtag. It's like do epic shit. We're going to make one that says be mediocre as fuck. And that is what you should strive to be, right? It's not about the bar of your setting. It's about the fact that, there's that quote that's like, great is the enemy of good. Right. And like I had an athlete comment this year. I said, man, you had a really, I said, I'm pretty pleased with the way things are going. And they commented back. I was like, what can I do to make this a perfectly pleased week? And I was like, dude, stop for a second. Like literally every day, right? And this is very typical of triathletes. They're very type A. They always want to be people pleasers and coach pleasers and they're perfectionists. And what they do is never good enough. And I was like, every day for the last 3 weeks, you literally said, this is the best shape I've ever been in my entire life. Things are going really well. Mm-hmm. I'm going with the flow. I'm in such a great zone. Why are we trying to find the last squeeze, right, to make it perfect, right? Or to do more or to do extra? That's become the answer, right? Is there always more, right? It's 2 ends of spectrum. Do more, be perfect. Or it's there's that 10,000 hour rule, but Ben Greenfield's got the 10-hour rule, and he says that if you do the 10-hour rule and drink, this specific coffee brew that he's now sponsoring with your Universe Mega Bracelet, then you will be a 9-hour guy in Kona. There's those ends of the spectrum, right? When the best thing is to focus on, like the Mike Tomlin quote I love so much is the standard is the standard. Well, setting the standard achievable is how the standard becomes repeatedly achievable, right? By making it not like, it's things that are like you can control. It's not about, and the output, which is a metric in which you to be scored upon. It's just waking up and doing the small things. Because when you do all the small things, no one else will, right? Most people will skip 10 small things, right? And swing for the fences for one big thing, right? We call it small ball, whatever you want to call it. They'll strike out 50 times, right? To go for one home run, but they'll live off that home run for the next 50 strikeouts, versus the leadoff guy who's like, I'm just getting on base, baby. Right. I'm making contact every single time. That's how things end up going really well. Not swinging for the fences, but the more people swing for the fences, like you're talking about, with your analogy with the 10,000 hour rule, is you're trying to get something back that's equally as big on the other end of the spectrum. Like you don't feel like you're doing really well. So I don't really want to chip my way back and do small ball. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm signing up for a 50 miler. I can't really get that's such a triathlete endurance athlete. Say, man, I'm just struggling with my running. I'm not really falling in love with it. I'm skipping a lot of workouts. Just not motivated. Yeah, so I signed up for this 50 miler. Shit. You're like, when is it? They're like, it's in 3 weeks. You think? Yeah. You're like, so it's not about the 50 miler. It's not about the endurance. It's not about the training. It's about you trying to fill something or trying to swing huge to find something, right? To find something when you can find everything that you need every day in just the small things, right? In life, like the really, really good days. And those days just happen, right? Like you said, you get to the end of the day and you're like, man, that's a pretty good day. Like it doesn't have to be terrible or outstanding, right? Like we talked about, I think last Friday, 10% of your days, whether you like it or not, are going to be terrible. The other 10% days are going to be accidentally spectacular when you had no control of it overall. The other 80% of the days are just kind of going to be, there is what it is, right? And those are the days you have to capitalize on by honestly understanding and valuing the fact that those are pretty damn good days, right? Like think about as much as we want to bemoan and complain about the world that we live in and where we are or what country you're in, and like, you wake up, most of you, if you have the opportunity to listen to this podcast, which, to be fair, is like not a huge, very mediocre.
Top 10.
It's top 10%. Is you're living lucky. A pretty good freaking life, right? Yeah, like the opportunities that we have, but and I think it is. I think as society becomes more and more depressed and anxious and fearful and sad, we crave the other end of the spectrum, which is the spectacular, right? To compensate for the amount of, I think, unfortunately, fear and depression and anxiety a lot of people feel right now. And that is growing from even such a small age with kids all the way through, obviously, the older population. It's like the more we feel that as a race, a human race, the more we jump for the spectacular, right? The other end of the spectrum. We don't go for in the middle, right? That's because there's nothing there. We need a spark to light a fire, right? And I think the level of spark you are chasing says a lot about, the light you're trying to shine.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of pressure to think about 10,000 hours. And to me, that's the 50 miler analogy, really. It's like, be happy with an hour, if you're having a hard time, if you're struggling to get kind of motivated, just bite off a chunk you can handle, really. And I think there's satisfaction and happiness in that, if you can allow yourself to be like, wow, I did something good there, or, if it's reading a book for an hour or whatever, something that you're passionate about, you got to be patient with it. And I'm not the best at it, but I know that really works. So,
go clean your oatmeal bowl.
Yeah, I'm going to go clean my bowl.
Yeah, he's going to clean his oatmeal bowl.
It's do what's in front of you.
Yeah, it's like, hey.
Do it now. That's a real Zen phrase. There's a t-shirt out there that we got. Do it now.
Do it now, yeah. And stop shopping online for the next thing to purchase. Go out for a run. It's like those little things like, think if I got a new Aero helmet, that would make me a lot faster. And you're like, you just skipped the last 9 bike workouts that you've had. Like, stop shopping for a freaking Aero helmet. Just do the small work that adds up. We hope this podcast added up for you in some way, shape, or form. As always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for a coach for the rest of the year, check it out. It's still early on. The season's upon us. I know a lot of athletes usually, April, May, and June are our busiest months coaching-wise with athletes, but I think some of the coaches that we have a few spots left, so look on to the coaches roster and find one that you like, and also go to our online store. It's a great way to support the podcast. We got a lot of awesome shirts that are out. The deadline is pretty much today when you listen to this. So do that, support us, let you know what you think. If you need anything at all, for Mike, he is available at crushingiron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me specifically, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man. We're all getting older.
Thanks for that.
Think about getting stronger, not faster. It'll pay off. See you.